Hello and welcome to the FLT Mag's interview project. FLT Mag is a product and service of IALLT, the International Association for Language Learning Technology, and you can find us at fltmag.com. I'm Jeff Samuels, and I'm joined today by three colleagues who I will ask to introduce themselves in just a moment. And what all of them, plus myself, what we all four have in common is a somewhat circuitous and different career path that involves computer-assisted language learning and the use of technology for language learning, but maybe isn't a direct straight line. So with that said, let me go ahead and ask each of my guests to introduce yourself. Tell us where do you work currently and what is your position? Mary, do you want to go first? And then we'll just kind of go around.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jeff, for this. Yes, my name is Maria Ocando Finol. I go by Mari, for those who know me, and I am currently working at Bryn Mawr College. I'm an educational technology specialist, and I'm part of a larger department, which is the Library and Information Technology Services Department, which integrates both library and IT services. And so as part of the IT services, I'm part of the educational technology team.
Great, thanks. Trent, do you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Trent Hoy. I'm currently a learning experience designer with Berlitz as part of the Global Learning Products division.
And Carly?
Hi, I'm Carly Bourne, and currently I have a very long title, academic technologist for digital learning experiences at Carleton College.
Very good, great. So a little bit of diversity here, for sure, in terms of there's technology involved, but definitely a variety of positions. So let me ask about your formal educational backgrounds and how you got to where you are now. Did you study computer-assisted language learning, or just language, or just technology, some combination, or maybe something, some tangential, slightly related field?
I think I'll keep the same order so I can go first. Yeah, so I actually, so my background way far back is in education and modern languages. That's what I did my undergrad in. I also studied journalism back at that time. But when I went into my graduate degree, I studied Spanish. So I got my PhD in Spanish at ASU. And there we had the certificate in computer assisted language learning. So yes, I did. I specialized in teaching Spanish as a second language. And more specifically in computer-assisted language learning. We had the graduate certificate, and so people from both the School of International Letters and Cultures and the English department went into that certificate usually.
So my bachelor's and my first master's are both in French. I was an adjunct professor for several years, and during that time as kind of professional development, I also took some online courses from the University of Colorado Boulder with their certificate program for teaching with languages with technology. And it was kind of through this entire process that I discovered that I really like making things to help people learn. And in my research of finding more jobs that let me do that, I discovered instructional design and went back to school to get a second master's in digital media design for learning. So it's kind of a hybrid degree that looks at both the pedagogy, but also the practical skills of how do you make these things.
So I did my undergrad at a small school outside of Chicago. I majored in Japanese and minored in French. And then I went to Japan for a couple of years and lived there. When I got back, I went to the Monterey Institute for International Studies, which is now affiliated with Middlebury, but at the time it was not. And I did my master's in teaching Japanese as a foreign language, a certificate in language program administration, and I actually helped to design and teach the computer-assisted language learning certificate that existed shortly after I graduated. Yeah, and then I ended up here. So.
Okay, so that certificate was at Monterey?
Yeah. Yeah, I was working under Dr. Leo Van Leer, and yeah, and we kind of put together a call certificate at that time. I think they maybe dropped it since then, to be honest, but I taught a couple of the courses, as well as teaching some in-service teachers in the area how to make best use of technology. And things like that.
That's so awesome. I love it. And I was studying, my college certificate was with Dr. Brian Smith and Andrew Ross. So, all familiar names.
Yeah, and I would be remiss not to mention that the program that Trent mentioned at Boulder, the founder of FLT Mag, Edwige Simon, was very much involved with that and ran that program for a while. So it's all very insular. But that's why IALLT is like a family. But I digress. So let me ask this then. So fascinating career paths, but is it what you guys envisioned? Is that the career path that you set out for? And were you more open to pursuing opportunities that came along ad hoc, or did you hit a roadblock or some sort of challenge that you had to overcome?
Interesting. It wasn't what I envisioned. So I'm originally from Venezuela. When I came here, I came just to get my master's degree in Spanish. So even getting my PhD wasn't at all what I envisioned. That was just a matter of a lot of, bureaucratic things that happened in the program. And I ended up applying to that PhD, got accepted, and it turned out to be really great. But I wasn't really finding my research fit within the Spanish department. And I did kind of really click with the people who were working in English as a second language, or English in general. And that was Dr. Brian Smith, who was there. And he had, he was leading a lot of things for the call certificate. They had a lot of activities there, and it just kind of started drawing me in. It was really great. I had some opportunities to do some conference organization, organized the AZ Call conference, kind of led the call club at ASU, which we started there. And I just got really, really interested in it, and also developed all these other skills. And at the same time, I was working, not at the same time, but shortly after, I was working with a program from the MLA in Mellon, which was a grant. It was called Connected Academics, and it was working for alternative paths in academia, so helping grad students figure that out. And so that really got me thinking about what else I wanted to do. So at that point, which was well before I graduated, I already knew that I didn't want to be faculty, that I didn't want to go the tenure track. I didn't know specifically what I wanted, but I did know that I wanted it to be more project based. So kind of stumbled upon it, kind of also mindfully thought about it at some point of my program.
My experience was very circuitous, as we've mentioned. Many of us have that kind of experience, but for me, I think a lot of it was driven by passiveness on my side. I think when I entered into undergrad, I was in a position where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started as a business major, and I tested into French language courses and just continued taking them. And by the time I got to the end of my junior year, I realized I hated being a business major, but I've already done most of the French major, so I might as well do that. And then when I finished undergrad, one of my friends said, "Oh, I'm going to Japan to teach abroad. You should do that too." And I had no other plans after graduating, because what do you do with an undergrad degree in a language at that level? And so I was like, sure, let's do that. So I went to Japan, taught, came back. And then in a casual conversation with one of my former professors, they just mentioned, "Oh, we have this line in our master's program that we're going to lose if we don't fill it. Do you want to come get a master's degree, essentially for free?" And I was like, sure, why not? It was right when the Great Recession hit. So that was a great moment to do that. And so then as part of that program, I was pulled into, teaching as a GTA. And that was my first exposure kind of teaching. I taught in Japan teaching English and French, but it's a different experience than teaching undergrads in the United States. And so that's when I kind of first discovered, hey, I kind of like this teaching thing and getting to come up with cool ways to help people learn. But then of course, once you graduate, what do you do with that? Well, you go become an adjunct somewhere, or you go for a PhD. And I was not ready to commit to more school. So I was an adjunct for a while. And then after realizing I really am not enjoying teaching the same thing over and over again in the same kind of prescribed way, how did I get to this point? I had just kind of accepted whatever fell across my path. And it's like, oh, well, this is what has been dictated that I will do. It was the easy solution. And so that's when I really had to do a lot of soul searching and say, what do I want from my career? What do I enjoy doing? And that's when I discovered instructional design. I'm like, this is what I really get excited about when I lesson plan. This is what I really get excited about in my free time, pouring hours into that I don't have to, that I'm not paid for. And so that's kind of where I really pivoted and made the first active decision in my education and career of like, I'm going to leave everything behind, move across the country, do a different graduate program, take out student loans for the first time, gulp, and commit to that. And it's been, no looking back, it's been a really great experience after that. So I think that's kind of right there.
Yeah, my experiences very much echo both Mari and Trent's experiences. By the time I was finishing out my bachelor's degree, I was already starting to think I was headed towards language education. And that's one of the reasons why I went to Japan on the JET program, because I was teaching English in middle school. I wanted a taste of teaching, to see if that was something I really liked doing. And it was. And so I came back and I went to Monterey and did my master's there. And Dr. Van Leer was very much into technology and the use of technology. He was very active in Calico at the time and kind of introduced me to that group of people. And he really acted as an important mentor to me in my career path. And so through a lot of other sort of coincidental experiences starting in high school, I had some skill at dealing with Macintosh computers, and the IT department at Monterey did not. And so I took over the lab. I was, a lot of education schools were using Macs at that time because they were more friendly than Windows 95. And one thing sort of just led to another, so that by the time I was graduating with my master's degree, I was applying to both teaching positions and sort of techie positions because I didn't know which one was going to stick. And I interviewed in both realms, but when I saw the job description for Carleton, at that time they were hiring academic computing coordinators for specific disciplines. And so we were supposed to be people with background in those disciplines, but technically inclined, and we did their everything. When I was hired, I did all of the tech support for all of the foreign languages and the English department. And I would build computers and I would deliver them and I would troubleshoot printers. And the idea behind it was that, while we were doing those things, we could start conversations about how's it going in your classes? What kind of assignments are you doing? Is there, what can we do to collaborate on something interesting, and I looked at the job description and I was like, wow, that's me. And so that was the job I got. And it has evolved a lot over the years. But I really didn't know where I was headed. But I'm still here. So.
Yeah, oh, that's great. So I was going to ask you guys a question, but you kind of have already answered, which is, are you where you hope to end up professionally? So let me change the question slightly, which is thinking about what you do in your day-to-day and thinking about also the bigger picture stuff, the impacts that you have and so forth. Where do you derive your professional satisfaction? And Trent has almost kind of already answered this for himself a little bit, but you can elaborate. And kind of related to that, how do you see yourself fitting in your university, your immediate, like I think about concentric circles of people you work with immediately, then the department that you relate to and so forth, and then the ever widening circles. So are you satisfied professionally? What are the kinds of things that are positive in that? And do you have a place where you're happy in your current profession? Obviously, don't want anyone to get in trouble by bad mouthing their institution, talking about anything negative, but let's talk about, where you fit in and how you feel about it.
Absolutely feel like I fit in, and actually even more so than I ever thought I would, because this kind of relates a little to what Trent was saying. I got tired when I was doing my PhD of teaching the same thing over and over again. That definitely happened to me as well. Teaching was just not doing it for me anymore. And I had been teaching at that point for, I think, 11 years. So no, So coming into Bryn Mawr as an educational technology specialist, and this is my first job out of my PhD, and I really do love it. It's been really great because it just keeps you kind of like on your toes. You're always doing something different. And we're not at Bryn Mawr, we're not tied to specific disciplines like the librarians are. Educational technologists, we're all generalists, so to speak. We do have types of technologies that we specialize in, but not disciplines. So we're always working on a different project or something incredibly different from math to languages. I do, however, work very closely with people in languages. I've kind of just made that for myself. Every time, a request comes in, I'll go like, oh, I'll take that. And just kind of like, because I like being close to the languages. So I do work very closely with everybody, but you work with people in Russian, with people in French. And so it becomes an environment in which you have enough of that content, intellectually satisfying content on one hand, but also enough of the dynamism of just actually doing different things all the time and working with technology and fixing things and figuring things out and discovering things that you had no idea existed. And that aspect of, I guess, like my work satisfaction, I get from my team, and the discipline specific I get from the people who I work with when I'm working within projects. So it kind of really blends in together very well. And also we have a lot of opportunities for professional development and conferences and presentations with colleges across the different consortia that we're part of. So like, for instance, with Carly. So all the time we're going to these kinds of events where we talk to people about the things that we care about, and we get to focus and kind of specialize in that. So I would say that absolutely. It's like what I envisioned and even better.
I would say for me, I'm still trying to find like that sweet spot. It took me 10 years to identify what I like, and it's still taking me some time to figure out the context in which I can actually do that. I've found that kind of the realms of instructional design and even language teaching with technology still are fairly separate from each other and are rather insular. I believe, the only person within my cohort that was interested in language as kind of the topic by which they came into instructional design. And even when I was participating in some of these conferences and things and courses before I got into my instructional design degree, I had never encountered some of these instructional design topics. And I think these two fields would really benefit from discussing more and having more overlap, because there's so much there to draw from one another. And there's also this dichotomy of spaces where I've worked for so long in academia, either as the instructor of record or assisting instructors to develop courses, that coming to Berlitz, this is my 3rd month here actually. And so the corporate life is a very different life indeed. So not, for better or for worse, it's just different. And so I'm having to adapt to all of these things that I became used to in academia, what to expect, what kind of my role is. It's very different in this environment. So while I still get to do some of the same tasks, I lack freedoms in some way, and I've gained others. And so it's still kind of navigating that balance and figuring out, is academia my home and I just got jaded and left and I realized that's what I wanted? Or is corporate, or is there some sort of like interstitial space there where I could blend them? And so that's what I'm still trying to figure out myself.
Yeah, I feel very connected to that idea, actually, Trent. I've been at Carleton for over 20 years at this point. And my job has changed a lot since the beginning. We've had to restructure as the use of technology has increased over time, and the stakes of the use of technology were increasing as well. Back in the day, if somebody was having trouble with Word, I would say, hey, can I take your machine for the afternoon and figure it out? And they're like, oh, sure, I've got all kinds of other things to do anyway. You can't do that anymore, right? I mean, that was when registration was still kids standing in line waiting to turn in papers, and memos were still on paper, and we had a few faculty who opted out of voicemail and stuff like that. And so the world has changed radically, especially after the last year. So I am now, one of my primary responsibilities is as the administrator to the learning management system. And one of the reasons for that is the language departments were some of the first ones to really jump on board using the LMS. And so I got better at it faster than some of my colleagues because my disciplines were using more of it. And then, that just has kind of snowballed. I have struggled some with professional interest in staying engaged and things like that. But I think I have been very lucky in a lot of ways because I've been given enough leeway to pursue some special projects. And so in the last 3 years, I started teaching high school Japanese at a local charter school because there was a lot of interest amongst that school. And I had to do a fair amount of negotiation at the college, but it really helped to bring my focus back on the classroom teaching experience after being on the tech side for so long. And it gave me a chance to do what I always wanted to do and never really got a chance to do. And it's a huge amount of fun. And so I'm lucky that they still let me do that. And I got a grant to start the program and everything. And so it's been going pretty well. The other thing I learned over time, though, is I could have maybe been a CS major. I've taught myself to program in a number of different languages, and I have a pet project called Language Lesson that is a system designed for enabling speaking exercises for foreign languages. And so I continue to get support for doing my little side projects, and that helps a lot. Because I'm a maker too, it turns out. So
That's that's great. Yeah, again, I could talk for 10 minutes responding to each of what the last of you said in this last round. And just let me just say, I totally relate to it. The academia versus corporate, it's like, to me, I felt I worked for 10 years like in the upside down. It just was not quite right. But let's go back to you guys. In thinking that about what I'm hoping is that a number of graduate students would be watching this. IALLT has tried to do more and more to reach out to emerging graduate students. And in particular, I think the FLT Mag is a good format, and just the topic of this interview is ripe for that. So I'm going to give you one of the kind of stock questions, which is if you could tell your former self, going back in time, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your graduate studies? Or even before that, if you want to go back to undergraduate, but thinking about where you are now, what advice would you give someone who may be a little bit behind where you find yourself currently? And again, we can go in order. And then for the last ones, I think we'll just kind of make a free-for-all.
Sounds good. Yeah, going in order for this one is a little bit harder, but I think the advice would be, so a couple of things. One of them would be, don't necessarily, if we're going back into, people who might be in their undergrad and looking for their first jobs and so on, don't necessarily try to do what you think you're gonna like. Try to do something that you're good at, because it just makes work just so much easier. And then you kind of end up stumbling upon other things. So if you're good at something, kind of like what Trent was saying, he had just, finished all the French course, and he was like, I might as well just do something with that. I think that's great. Definitely go to something that you've already figured out how to do. It makes life easier. But if you're a little bit further down the road and you're maybe getting your PhD or your master's, and if you have any opportunity to do anything that's not research and not teaching, do that. If they ask you to organize something, a conference, a talk, if they ask you to manage a budget for something, even if it's just your student graduate organization, if they ask you to do any of those things, do it. I know it's more work. I know you don't have time because you're doing research. I know your chair is asking you to do research 100% of the time. Tell them no. and allow yourself to explore a little bit of the other things. If you're interested in something, maybe a little bit, if you even have a glimpse of an interest in something that might not be the tenure track, for instance, definitely try some other things out, because you might just discover that you're really good at it. And it's going to be really hard when you graduate to get a job that's not academic if you haven't actually done any non-academic tasks for a while. So they're going to want to see what you've done. And anything that you can do that's actually kind of more operational, more staff-like, so to speak, will be really good for your CV. So I would say that.
I would say, don't be afraid to try new things, even if it might fail. I think that's a hard one, especially when it comes to student loans and commitment and stuff like that, but just in small ways. I think, as I mentioned before, my early education path was so driven by what was convenient, what was put right in front of me, what do I not have to like search for? But it was when I had to actually dig deep and think, what do I enjoy? When I'm working, when I'm doing my work that I'm paid for, what do I find myself spending extra time on because I enjoy it? Where do I find myself putting in overtime, not because I feel obligated, because I'm personally engaged in this task? And for me, that was making things. That was like, oh, let me make a video for my class. Let me come up with like some cool way to do a VR simulation, and doing all of that above and beyond what was necessary. And then from that, I actually ended up building a portfolio that I would have never otherwise had. So when I switched fields, yeah, I walked in with street cred from having, taught undergraduate courses, but I had a whole litany of things that I could say, here's a project that I made. Here are the tools that I used to make that. I'm not an expert, but I had a goal and I taught myself, I figured out how to do it. Even if I wasn't very good at it, I got the job done. And that speaks a lot about your kind of pragmatic skills and ability to get things done. So I think, don't be afraid to explore, try new things, figure out what it is that you like and what you don't like. That will help you hone in on the kinds of work experiences that are going to be more fulfilling for you.
Those are both two really great pieces of advice that are very tough to follow. In my case, I think I would say, don't limit yourself by who you think you are now, or who you think you will be in the future. If something looks interesting, well, along with like Mari said, just go for it. Just do it. It's taken me a while in a meandering sort of career that I've had, but it turns out I love making things. I love programming. Computer languages are far easier than human languages to learn. And I also really love acoustic phonetics, it turns out. And that is not something I didn't do a PhD because I was not interested in literature. I was really just going for language pedagogy, right? And there were a few programs in that direction, but I just didn't see the need to do it. And I think by part of the issue that I maybe struggled with personally was not seeing myself in a very different sort of role in the future. And what's really great about the times now is that that's easier for young people to see. As I was a first generation college student, I had a long way to go. And so I think it's really great, all of the opportunities that are available now to people, and don't let those define you yet.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thinking about that as well. In my first round of graduate school, there were some overt and unspoken rules, and the thing was, the purpose of it was to produce you in the image of your professors and in their demeanor, their interests, where they ate lunch, how they dressed, all of that stuff, how they thought, what they studied, what was acceptable, what was not acceptable. And I just don't find that to be the case anymore, or certainly in this field, which brings me to as we start to wind down, just kind of open this up to anyone who might want to share a thought. So we talked about giving yourself advice in the past, right? Where do you see things headed for people who are studying language and technology, particularly if they're more in a centrally in call right now? What opportunities do you see on the horizon? Where do you think it's headed?
Oh, wow. I think it's really unpredictable. I think there's a lot of stuff Carly, did you want to go first? I
Oh
know
no,
I saw you
I
unmuted.
feel
Oh,
free, and then I'll just jump in.
yeah, I think that, oh, there are so many things. Subscribe to the linguist list and start looking at the jobs that are posted. And you'll see that there is everything from, oh, wow, especially if you go into industry and if you know a little bit of computer science, there are amazing things. You can be programming and developing great things for, Amazon, Netflix, Google, all these kinds of things. But not only that, I do think that if you had asked me this a year ago, I wouldn't have said the same thing. But after COVID, it's kind of trite, but it is true. The world has changed, and people now do understand technology in a very different way. And I think that the edge that you have knowing technology will allow you to go pretty much wherever you want to. Even if you specialize in languages and you want to go into something that is not languages, it transfers over. The technology does transfer over. So you can, once you realize that, you pretty much have the whole world at your hand. And yes, everybody else also knows technology, but knowing pedagogy and technology is different from knowing just technology. And so I do think that you'll have a competitive edge, especially if you're trying to go into academic endeavors or things that have some sort of, developing apps or software for instructional purposes, even if that's industry. I think there's a lot of space there. And there's probably a million things that I have never even thought of that are going to be happening in the next years. Just keep an eye out and stay curious and stay,
I
updated.
completely agree. I completely agree with that. One of the things that I for a time was advising students here on campus, and I have, other language geeks who find me and talk to me about what they should be doing with their language degree and things like that. And I said, the thing is, language is a communication skill, right? You do things through language. So you pair language knowledge with something else that you love, and then you can make something really interesting. And one of the great things about going through a language pedagogy program is that it's some of the most in-depth pedagogy training you will get. I mean, there are obviously teacher trainer programs in a lot of different disciplines, but you really have to dig deep when you're teaching languages. And so the way that we understand pedagogy really, really does add quite a lot to one's ability to see technologies and use them in really interesting ways. I helped a professor of religion gamify a Zen Buddhism class. It was amazing. And so, I mean, you never know what you're going to come up with. And gosh, it's a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the lessons that can be learned from all of these different fields are kind of all merging together. I find in my role that there's not one specific job or degree that prepared me for what I do. It's actually, I get a little bit from column A, column B, column C. Everything kind of comes together. There's times when I need my language background in order to design a lesson around the pedagogy of language acquisition, but I also need my instructional design background to say, this is going to live in a web space. Users have to interact with this. How do I set up everything that the user is going to interact with to actually facilitate the pedagogy that I've designed for the lesson? And then, okay, well, I have to at least build a prototype so that the real builders can make that nice version. How do I rig that together so that someone can understand that I can communicate with someone who doesn't have a background in pedagogy or language acquisition so they can still get the right product or deliverable created? And then how do I explain that to faculty members who all of a sudden are also being asked to create their own courses online and keep in mind all of these things that they were most likely never fully trained in? And so all of these skills kind of together is kind of are blurring. And so I think it's an interesting space for anyone interested in getting into the field to inform yourself about, which pillar are you not as well established in. Go learn about that, go see how that applies, because I guarantee you that any research you do in that will be immediately applicable to what you're doing now and definitely in the future.
Oh, Great, thank you all. Well, so we're nearly at the end of our time, but I just want to ask if there are any other closing thoughts or parting thoughts that you'd like to share with the people who are watching.
I do want to, I did want to add one more thing to this just kind of last round that we did. And it's that if we've learned anything in the last, I'd say 1 year, but it has been so much longer than 1 year. If there's anything I've learned from that is that we are essential. The college, faculty did amazing things, and what we asked of students was so much, and they really came through. It was wonderful. But I really have to say that what staff did during this time and what people in technology did during this time, what I saw my colleagues do, what I did myself without trying to toot my own horn, we went above and beyond. We had a lot of strain put on ourselves. It was crucial to academia in general surviving. And people realize that now. And even if there's some, detractors here and there that won't necessarily realize it overall, academic institutions do, they know what we're worth now. And if you have the skills, go for it, because there's a market now. There's a really good market for it right now. And it's also an employees market because of the labor shortage and many things that are happening. You have a competitive edge. You really do. Just go for it and ask. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need in terms of, salary, accommodations, and all those things, because you really are going to be worth it right now in this stage of everything that we are.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Carleton is a undergraduate only residential liberal arts college. We don't do online. Using the LMS was optional. And that changed on March 12th, 2020 at approximately 8:30 a.m. when the president announced that we were going fully online for our spring term. And then I had 3 weeks to do about 10 years of professional development for our faculty. And, I had a team of people to work with, but I was the LMS person and they did other things. So not only was I working with faculty to try to catch them up, I was working with my team members to catch them up too. And now we're all a much better team because of it. And I certainly do feel appreciated by the faculty and the institution. But Mari is right. This has really made clear that technology is not going to go away, right? And it is a critical skill for teachers, even as a way of modeling for their students. And so, yeah. And the great thing is every day is different. Every day is different.
Every day something different breaks.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the past year or so has kind of served as a billboard for what I actually do. It's like, can I troubleshoot your problems? Yes, I can, but I can do so much more than that for you than just copy your information into the LMS. And I think that it has really opened the eyes to a lot of people, faculty, administration, students, to the role that good pedagogy and design can do for courses, especially online or even face-to-face ones, and implementing technology. So I think, as Mari was saying, that there are a lot of positions opening up now that places realize that, oh hey, we really do need people that full-time focus on this kind of thing. Our faculty need this kind of support, and so there's plenty there if you want to.
Yeah, and not only that, but we can't keep the teams small as they have been. We actually need to expand them, because now that people know technology, you can't unring that bell. There's more of a need for it. So we need more people to support the technology for sure.
Well, that's great. Very good thoughts. And I think, the other aspect of this, if I can just, maybe I'll take the last word here, is students are driving some of this too. I mean, they have expectations as well. And even students who didn't have access to a computer or didn't want to make full use of it or saw it as something that was, when they had to do it for educational purposes, it wasn't fun, it wasn't engaging, it wasn't what they wanted to do, it was a chore. They're starting to see the potential there, and they're starting to see that they can own their own learning process, and that they can start to have a little self-actualization, and they're starting to see as well. It seems, career paths, the stuff that we were talking about, opportunities, the gig economy, charting your own course, reacting to opportunities that come along, not having one job that you have your entire career and then retiring and stopping entirely and then sitting there watching TV. That's not even close to what they'll be doing. And so teachers are seeing that the students are also thinking in these terms and looking for these opportunities as well. Well, thank you all again. This has been a fascinating interview. It also would have made a fantastic panel at a conference, but I think we might still be able to do that at some point, maybe at the next IALLT, for example. But I think this will be very impactful for our viewers. So again, this has been an episode of the interview project of IALLT through the FLT Mag. You can find us again at fltmag.com. And once again, I want to thank my colleagues for their time today and wish you all the very best. Talk to you soon.